Hello, everybody. So, today we're going to be talking about the actual revolution itself, the fighting, the war, and basically how it came that the rebels are going to win. So, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, look, when you're looking at the Revolutionary War, you need to divide the people into three categories. You have the patriots, people who are supporting independence from Great Britain, supporting the Continental Army, so like the full-on troops, and also like the militia, which are just like citizen soldiers who are joining the fight for freedom. You have the neutrals, the people who just don't care one way or the other. They just want to know where to send their taxes each year. And then you have the loyalists or the Tories. They are the ones who stay loyal to Britain, and they are going to fight on the side of the redcoats. All right, the Revolutionary Armies. Let's take a look at what the British soldiers look like during this time. The British Army was the most powerful in the world at this time. They had the best equipment, they had the best weapons, they had some of them they were some of the more highly disciplined soldiers, like in fighting on land and fighting on the seas. The troops were like very, very well trained. They did not break under pressure very easily. And the British had the strongest navy in the world at this time. It was one of the biggest and most heavily armed, and they knew the best sea combat tactics. All right. And the Americans. All right. So, something that the British didn't, we knew the land. We're the ones who lived here. So, we know where to fight and how to fight on the territory. All right. Using weapons appropriate for landscape. We had a lot of guys who were hunters. So, we would have guys who had rifles, not just smoothbore muskets. These smoothbore muskets, like what the British Army had and what a fair amount of Americans had, they didn't have rifling, which is the grooves inside of a gun barrel that give the bullet or the musket ball a spin that make them go further and more accurate. Now, with the rifles, they took a little bit longer to load because they had to dig into the grooves, but they could shoot longer distances more accurately. So the riflemen were actually like some of the better ones. They would go out and do skirmishes, like taking shots at the enemy. There is, you could credit the first American, like quote unquote, sniper coming from the Revolution. He climbed up in a tree and he shot a officer off of his horse from, I want to say it was 150 yards away, which was a very, very difficult shot with one of these time periods firearms. Right. Now, unlike the British who wore these bright red coats, you knew exactly where they were. The Americans would wear, at least the like the militiamen would wear pieces of different uniforms. They would have all sorts of different color clothings, browns, greens, blacks, blues, tans, and they would blend into the surroundings a lot more, kind of like a type of camouflage, not full bore camouflage, but sort of. All right. Now, some advantages, like I mentioned before, the accuracy of the rifle, knowledge of the land, guerrilla warfare tactics. Think like when I described the French and Indian War, the way that the Native American warriors fought. Running from tree to tree, shooting behind rocks, not staying in the same place, fighting in a line where you're easy to pick off. Basically, constantly moving around, ambushes. That is a lot of the tactics that the Americans would utilize. Right? And also, we had the better commanders, guys like Washington. Right? And that is in contrast to the British, who the officers in charge of the army for the British, they saw getting a post in the army in the Americas as a insult or a punishment. You're just like, why should I be here? My talents would be better served elsewhere for the empire. That would be their mentality. So you had their meh attitude versus, all right, boys, let's go and get them on the American side. All right, the first shots are going to be fired here, Lexington and Concord. Now, the war's going to begin with the Minutemen in Massachusetts, and the Minutemen are called the Minutemen because they could be ready to fight in a minute's notice. All right, so the British, they are marching from Boston. They're making their way to Lexington and then Concord, looking to arrest political dissenters, so people who are speaking against the British Empire, and to seize weapons and ammunition that are said to be stockpiled in these two small towns. So several hundred, I believe it's like 500 or 600 British are marching from Boston to these little towns. And this is when we have, the Paul Revere Midnight Ride. Him and like 3 other guys are sending out the word to muster and signal the Minutemen, be like, hey, they're on their way. We need to be ready. So the British are going to march first to Lexington. They're going to be met by about 75 militiamen just waiting in the town center, the village green, as it's called at the time. And they're basically going to have a showdown where our 75 militiamen or Minutemen are facing off against at least the first British troops to arrive. They got guns at the ready, pointed at each other. Then out of nowhere, a shot just rings out. No one knows who fired this shot. And it is called sometimes the shot heard round the world because it is the first shot of the war for independence. So the shot rings out and no one knows who did it. Both sides open fire on each other. More militiamen, Minutemen, are hit than the British. And they basically the Minutemen have to pull out of town, and the British just continue to march on through Lexington after they ransack the town looking for, the weapons and ammo and everything that they're looking for. And they continue on to Concord, where they do the same thing. But as they are doing so, you have all of these Minutemen and militia just coming in from the farms and villages outside of Lexington and Concord by the hundreds. And they are essentially chasing the British back to Boston and fighting them along the way, to where the British are actually outnumbered almost 2-1. And they basically begin what is called the Siege of Boston with the Minutemen surrounding the city, or at least blocking the land route to access the city because Boston is on the water. And that is then going to lead up to one of the major battles that we get to talk about next. All right, major battles. There's a couple to talk about. Fort Ticonderoga, Bunker Hill, and the Battle of Trenton. All right, these are some of the early ones. Fort Ticonderoga, 1775, is a big strategic point in New York that needs to be taken, and a guy named Ethan Allen and about 125 mountain men that were under his command attack this fort in the middle of the night, and they basically catch the British with their pants down. So the British are not expecting anything, and they take the fort without firing a single shot. They basically catch everybody in their sleep. So like this picture on the side here, this is Ethan Allen right here in the center, got the sword drawn, and then you got the British commander of the fort come out, be like, what's going on out here? It's like, oh, we've been taken over. Oh boy. So, these officers with their families, the soldiers are caught basically sleeping on the job. And yeah, it's just a big embarrassment for the British Army. So the cannons that are taken from this fort, essentially at the same time as the British are being chased back to Boston, the cannons from the fort are taken by Ethan Allen and his men and brought to Boston for the siege of Boston. The Minutemen in Boston are basically just blocking the British from entering or leaving the city. Well, just getting out. But then Ethan Allen shows up with cannons so they can actually begin a full-on battle. And that's what leads to the Battle of Bunker Hill. Now, everybody's probably heard of this battle, but you might not know the specifics of this battle. This is the first big battle of the American Revolution. All right, located near Boston on a hill. Though most of the fighting did not actually take place on Bunker Hill, it took place on the hill next door that's called Breed's Hill. Now, the British, they charge up this hill 3 times. The first 2 times they are repelled, they are pushed back, they have to retreat. But on the third charge, they are able to break the Minutemen's lines and make the Minutemen retreat. Only because the Americans ran out of ammunition. They had nothing left to shoot the British with. If they had had more ammo and gunpowder all stocked up, they probably could have won this battle, which would have been an even bigger hit on the British, right? And because of that fact, even though they technically lost the battle, the Americans, it was a moral victory. It's like, hey, the only reason we lost, we ran out of bullets to kill them with. So, like, if we had more, we would have won. So, like, they were not disheartened. They didn't lose any of that vigor that for the fight. All right. So, this is actually one of the costliest battles for the British during the whole war. They lost more men at this one battle than pretty much any other because of those charges up a hill to a fortified position in the open, and you were in bright red uniforms. The British lost a little over 1,000 men. No other battles during the Revolution would see casualties of that high. The Americans lost a little over 400. It's a pretty big difference between the two, as well as just in general. That's a lot of guys to fall dead in one day's worth of fighting. Now, because of the turnout of this battle, the British get very nervous, like, okay, this isn't just some rabble that we can just chase off. Like, this is going to be a hard fight. And it's after Bunker Hill that Washington takes command of the entire Continental Army, like the full-on troops, which would then be supported by Minutemen, by the militia. All right. There is a famous quote that comes from the Battle of Bunker Hill. Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. All right. So basically, let the British come close enough to where you can see detail on their faces and then blow them away. Because, like, hey, conserve your ammo, only shoot when you know you can hit them, and that's like when they're close enough you can see the whites of their eyes. All right, the Battle of Trenton. All right, this is a battle that involves Hessian mercenaries. These are German mercenaries from the German Principality or German Minor Kingdom of Hesse. There were other German mercenaries, but overall, more were from Hesse. So Germans in general were just called Hessians. This is the surprise Christmas day, the surprise Christmas attack, where Washington crosses the Delaware and attacks a German fort or location that is housing about 1,000 German soldiers and captures them all. There's only one casualty, if I remember correctly. 4 Americans were injured. No one actually died on the American side. Just 4 guys got hurt. And the German commander, a Colonel Rahl, he was injured but wasn't able to recover. He would die from the one injury that he took. He probably got stabbed or like a good shot to the head that just bled out. I don't exactly remember how. But only one death in that battle, I guess you want to call it. And this would actually get the British out of central New Jersey and gets them on the run. So they're like retreating up to like New York. All right, a couple more significant battles. Saratoga, very important battle. Valley Forge, not a battle, but a very, very significant event in the war. And then Yorktown. Of course, there are a bunch more smaller, minor battles and that take place between a lot of these, but we're only talking about the key ones. All right, Saratoga. This is the turning point in the war. Victory here, basically, well, for the most part, most battles before Saratoga were being won by the British. The bigger fights were. We had a couple, but the British had the upper hand. But then Saratoga happens. This is a battle that is the biggest one up until this time in the war. And it's going to convince the French to help us out. So, about 5,000 British soldiers surrendered to Washington at this battle. And this is the incentive that the French want for getting involved. Because the French, they want revenge for the defeat they suffered in the French and Indian War. And by helping the British lose colonies is like one of the best ways that it can happen. So they're going to support the British colonies, the Americans becoming independent as payback. And hopefully economically that the new American nation, however they decide to govern themselves, could become a trade partner for the French. That's probably more of an underhanded want of theirs. Valley Forge. Everybody knows Valley Forge, has at least heard of it. And what it is the winter camp of 1777 to 1778. And the American army basically runs out of food, runs out of fresh clothing. So it is very bad situation here. A lot of men are going to die. Exposure to the cold, they're going to starve. Washington appeals to the Congress for help, but no help is able to come. This is the lowest point that the American army goes through. Basically, if this winter breaks them, there is no more war. All right, anybody who tries to run away from the army, deserters, they are shot basically on sight. It's like, hey, like, we got a runner, catch him, execution by firing squad type deal. Pretty bad stuff. But this is also when the Marquis de Lafayette joins Washington, and he is going to, along with Friedrich von Steuben, a German, who they're going to basically whip the army into shape, teaching them all the European fighting styles. They're going to drill them. They're going to make them hardened, strong soldiers. And they may have lost a lot during this winter, but they're going to come out stronger than they went in, like militarily. And that's going to be in their favor for the following 3 years until the Battle of Yorktown, because now they've got the British on the run. So, the Battle of Yorktown, the French, they have a fleet of ships that are blocking the Chesapeake Bay. So, no British are able to escape from this battle. And they are going to force the top British general, by a guy named by the name of Cornwallis. He's basically fighting an army twice the size of his own. They are surrounded. So as you can see here, this is the main camp here of the British. They have some over across the river, but they are completely surrounded. You got the French troops, you got the American troops. They can't cross over the river here. And over here, they're cut off by British and French troops. You got the French fleet here blocking their escape. They got nowhere to go. The only thing they can do is surrender. So about 8,700 troops surrender. Cornwallis, he sends out one of his subordinates to actually deliver the surrender because he's too proud to do it himself. And yeah, this is the end of the war. And as the British troops are marching out, like in surrender, the band that plays for the army as they march plays "The World Has Turned Upside Down." Very poetic with the imagery there, right? All right. So just to wrap things up, let's go over just a couple of key people and things that happened. Of course, we're going to talk about some people, and we have to talk about Patrick Henry. This is one of the big spokesmen for early independence in the movement. He's the guy who gives the "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. All right. He's going to be a big part of helping convince Virginia, the colony of Virginia, to get involved with the independence. Like his words, "Give me liberty or give me death," become like a battle cry for the Americans. All right. Washington, of course, he is the general. He's the top guy. He is also going to be known for avoiding any situation that could possibly destroy his army. He would only fight when he thought he could win. Otherwise, he would use hit and run tactics, ambushes, to basically draw out the British and just like the goal is basically just to survive longer than the British can. Like, pester them so much that they just give up. All right, Benjamin Franklin. He's very important during the Revolution. He's one of the big political people. He goes over to France. He's the guy who actually gets the alliance with France going with the Treaty of Alliance after the Battle of Saratoga happens. He becomes very popular in France because, like, everybody in France, they got the big powdered wigs, all the heavy, pale makeup. And then here comes this American who has a tan. He's got his own hair flowing in the wind, and they just become enamored with him. Just like everybody wants to know Benjamin Franklin. He becomes a very, very popular guy. All right. Now, our revolution is going to inspire the world. Okay. And because of the success, we show that a powerful mother country can be overthrown through sheer will and determination. And it's going to, it's going to in turn affect the French Revolution, the Latin American revolutions. It's going to affect a lot of independence movements that follow. And it shows how it happens. You basically drag the war on until the aggressor, the oppressor, gives up. And it also certainly helps if the war's not popular in that home country. Like Great Britain, they didn't care. It wasn't a popular war. It's like, how dare they? How dare they go in rebellion? It was more like, that's what they want? Who cares? Just let them have it. We don't care. Yep. So that is where we're going to end. And yeah, all right. Make sure you come back next time where we will continue going on with our lessons in Virginia and U.S. history.